I do not need to employ any hyperbole, nor find any fancy words to state the reality of the situation humanity currently faces. Our world is not a happy place today. Wherever we look, and in whichever area of our lives to which we turn our attention, there is unhappiness, distrust, and loss of confidence in the structures that have guided the governance of the world since the end of the Second World War, nearly 8 decades ago. Mr. President, the theme chosen for this meeting is rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. The choice of the theme implies that there's general acknowledgement that things are not what they ought to be in our world. The mutual trust among nations that is required to ensure harmony has considerably diminished. The cohesion that we need to build the peace and prosperity of our societies is disintegrating and nearing Cold War lows. We do not seem to have any common values on which we can all agree, nor common goals to which we all aspire. The fault lines are not just between poor and rich, or the South and North, or the developed and developing countries. Even within well-established and rich countries, the tensions over trade, climate, political boundaries, and geopolitical spheres of influence are palpable. Long-held definitions are being challenged, and sacred truths and beliefs are being questioned or discarded outright. And in some instances, the deliberate peddling of blatant untruths has become acceptable. This organization, the United Nations, under whose auspices we, the nations of the world, are gathered for the annual review of the world, was established in the belief that our common humanity would be the overriding consideration in dealing with the problems that would invariably arise when we deal with one another. There is no doubt that the organization has achieved a great deal in its 78 years of existence, of which we can all be justifiably proud. But it is also true that the reluctance by the nations that were the major powers at the formation of the organization to agree to any reform to reflect present realities has led to the undermining of the credibility of the United Nations and some of its organs, in particular, the Security Council. Ghana is currently serving out the second of its 2-year term on the Security Council as a non-permanent member. This is the 4th time in the 66 years since we joined the UN, the first post-colonial African nation to do so, that we've had the privilege of serving on the Council. Mr. President, it has been a sad and disappointing experience for us. We've witnessed it firsthand, over and over again, that the big powers of the United Nations might be preaching democracy, fairness, and justice around the world, but are happy to practice the opposite here at the United Nations, prioritizing parochial interests over those of humanity. Back in 2017, the first time I addressed the General Assembly as President of my country, I spoke at length on the need to reform of the United Nations and of the Security Council in particular. I said then that the urgent need to reform this organization had been talked about and scheduled for a long time, but somehow we've never found the courage and the will to execute it. I said then that Ghana supports UN reform, especially of the Security Council, as set out in Africa's common position on UN reform, based on the Eswatini Consensus. Mr. President, I said then that the time was long overdue to correct the long-standing injustice that the current structure and composition of the United Nations Security Council represent for the nations of Africa. After serving on the Council at this difficult time in the world, our views on the need for reform have been even more strongly reasserted. We cannot continue to preach democracy, equality, and good governance around the globe. We cannot insist on peace and justice in the world when our global organization is seen by the majority of its members and the people of the world as hampered by an unjust and unfair structure.